every Friday, our final episode of the week, for our fieriest 5 minutes, without a doubt. This is where real talkers fire us their hottest takes. It's the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and we thought we'd lead with one on trade, considering these tariffs that'll be implemented tomorrow, most likely. This one from Scott, who says, Jean Chretien needs to stay retired. I find it very interesting that Chrétien's decided to weigh in on this conversation about tariffs in the U.S. Back in '93, you'll remember the Liberals formed a majority government and NAFTA had not yet taken effect. And rather than use this opportunity to fight for Canada and Canadian jobs, Prime Minister Chrétien kept the agreement, arguing it was a great day for Canada and our trade relationship with Mexico and the U.S. But over the next 30 years, we gradually lost our manufacturing sector to Mexico. The auto sector saw thousands of jobs move as plants closed and reopened in Mexico. He says Mr. Chrétien did win 3 straight majorities, but not because he was a great prime minister. Has more to do with the fact that the Conservative vote was split between 3 parties. I thought Chrétien, says Scott in Sherwood Park, was one of the more arrogant prime ministers. When we were experiencing high unemployment in Saskatchewan in the 90s, he told us to quit bitching and get back to work. Jean Chrétien, in my opinion, doesn't care about the consequences of his actions and has never taken responsibility for keeping NAFTA, so I would appreciate if he kept his mouth shut. He had one chance to fight for Canada in the 90s, and he blew it. That from Scott in Sherwood Park. What about this one from Pilot One, who says when the National Energy Program was imposed, the unemployment rate in Alberta rose from 3.7 to 12.4%. The bankruptcy rate rose by 150%, and Alberta's losses were estimated to be between $50 and $100 billion. People need to know this before they condemn Danielle Smith and her lone wolf policies. Alberta was attacked in the 80s, and if we join this clown show now, the same thing's going to happen. Smith is doing the right thing. This is important for Canadians to realize. We could have stepped up and been united in energy and trade, but we didn't, and now everybody wants Alberta to take it on the chin again. Real talkers have influence. This show does, says Pilot One, and people need to know the truth of what could happen. For every oil job lost, there's another job lost in other sectors. Remember that. That from Pilot One. What about this one from Greg? Jess Boy, I'm a regular listener of Real Talk. I appreciate how you discuss issues in a balanced and informative way. Thank you very much. He says, I've read various reports about the release of Alberta's COVID-19 response. We talked about this yesterday with the new president of the Alberta Medical Association, January 30th episode. Check it out. He says, released on a Friday afternoon. Didn't you know? Nothing to see here. What a report. To think the government spent $2 million on this claptrap, using ivermectin, an insecticide used on livestock to treat COVID, sounds more like snake oil than science. The health minister quoted on saying the report contains a broad range of perspectives, but all of them based on actual science. What? Says this government spent $2 million on a diluted report, and then on the next breath, they'll cut funding to groups helping disabled people. Not much compassion, not a good look. This is what predators do in the wild. Greg says, I'm annoyed that Danielle Smith thinks the government's protecting Albertans from lawsuits in coal. Says of the 2 options available, mining or lawsuits seem to be the best of the worst, because at least we have a clear understanding of the final cost to Albertans. That from Greg. How about this one from Karen, who says Erica Baruti's comments on coal in a recent episode of Real Talk made my head explode. She spoke about the referendum in the Crow's Nest Pass and the people had to live there voting in favor of Grassy Mountain, except for the mine is located in the MD of Ranchland, which is north of Crow's Nest Pass. Did they have a referendum in Ranchland? Of course not, because the residents there are opposed to the mine. Karen says, I'm one of the crazies on the left. She talks about screaming with a sign on my lawn. I've had a Mountains Not Mines sticker on the back of my car since the first protests. Close to 80% of Albertans' opinions have not changed. We don't want mining in the eastern slopes. Erica said, quote, Karen in Edmonton shouldn't have a say about what happens in the Crow's Nest Pass. Well, I'm Karen in Lethbridge, and the water from those eastern slopes runs downstream to the Old Man River, which is my drinking water, so hell yeah, I should have a say. Thanks to Real Talk for continuing to talk about this issue. Keep up the good work. Have a great weekend. Karen in Lethbridge, a.k.a. a raging granny. This one from Wayne. This is a YouTube comment on one of our coal episodes. He says, energy costs need to come down, period. And if people are hurting bad enough and the economy gets bad enough, people are going to start burning tires to heat their homes. Don't burn tires to heat your homes. He says people will poach grizzly bears to feed their families. Wayne, not a good idea. He says it's hard for government-paid officials to understand what common, hardworking taxpayers feel when their lifestyle and paychecks and pensions exclude them from what normal people feel, right? If you're a politician making a guaranteed $250 a year, it's easy to point fingers and focus on the environment. If you're making $150 in your household, everything's going okay, But 8 years later, now you're worried about how you're going to feed your family and politicians are telling you you're a bad person. Guess what? People don't care. People will burn tires and poach grizzly bears. You take a man's pride and ability to provide for his family away and the earth will burn. Danielle Smith understands something fundamental to our culture that you're not seeing, Jesperson. Western Canada's culture is based on providing for their own, not rebate checks and government handouts. Says, I'm not convinced Canada survives the next 4 years of Trump. Canadian politicians preparing for a friendly game of poker, and Trump's dismantling everything. Wayne says, I moved to Canada when I was 10. I've loved this country. I call it my own. But Canada's best days are distant. I'd love to see a resurgence in Canadian nationalism, pride in our nation, Canada becoming a superpower, and it's not going to happen by China being paid to pollute while our citizens suffer. That from Wayne. And how about this one from Ronnie, who says, Jespo, I was horrified to hear that there had been a small, far-right, neo-Nazi rally in my literal backyard of St. Albert. This is the kind of thing you'd expect your elected officials to condemn, but I'd be hard-pressed to see either Danielle Smith or anyone in her cabinet condemn it. You know why? Because that's their base. And the only political opinion that matters to these people, any silence from the premier on this or anyone in government is a tacit endorsement of the ideology. That from Ronnie. You can fire up your flamethrower anytime to talk@RyanJesperson.com. It is proudly presented by the DQs in Palisades, Namao, Newcastle, Westmount, and in Sherwood Park on Baseline Road. Thanks to everybody who fires up their flamethrower every single week, including comments on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing there, and thanks in advance for joining us this weekend, Saturday, from 9 to 3:30 at Larry Alexiak Field in St. Albert for the annual Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic presented by Molson Canadian. Infamous is going to be spinning the tunes. We got Real Talkers showing up to help our volunteers. We love you so much, and 24 teams fighting to win the Wazzy Cup. We'll see you there, and if not, we'll talk to you again on Monday. Take care.